Rhonda, okay?
Yep.
Oh,
It's
never
done.
mind. Okay, got it.
I was going to say, that's why I'm calling the meeting to order. All right. Are we live?
Yep.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
All right. With that, I'm going to turn around and Rhonda, you have an attendance of everybody who's attending?
I do.
Good. Thank you. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So move.
Second.
Second. Any comments? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right again? So moved. With that, and unfortunately, I do not have the agenda in front of me because my printer will not print it, and I don't want to have my screen up at the same time I'm doing this. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss, at the last meeting, we discussed with June Crawford that we would discuss the historical preservation and the activity that's going on with that side of our boards within our town of Grand Island. I think it's a good position to understand how that fits into our comp plan and the things that we can do within the comp plan that can help things move forward. So with that, I've had a conversation with June Crawford, and she's done some really, we've had a meeting together to talk about the scope of stuff, and then also the fact she's had a number of meetings with her peers on this subject. So with that, I am going to move the conversation to June Crawford.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I just want to give you all an update on what's going on with Historic Preservation Board, and basically what this is what are we doing at this point about Ferry Village, since that plays such a big role in the waterfront development, and because it was one of the things that was listed on the survey as one of the things that people were concerned about. So I want to tell you a couple things. As far as updates on the board activities, things that were on the spreadsheet. Martha, if you can catch these. Originally, we were talking about property identifications for all of the island, and we have about 100 properties now where we're gathering pictures, ownership records, and brief histories as they are available to us. We're looking at, I don't know where I am here. Can you see me?
Yes.
We can see
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Something's gone wrong on my screen. I can't see anybody. Anyway, so we're gathering pictures, ownership records, and brief histories of those. And Ferry Village, we've made a priority in this. The next one is the Alt Farm on Whitehaven Road, which is a current agenda item for us because they have several historic buildings on their property. And are working on those. And then thirdly, Schoolhouse 5 and the town was, they're still at Kelly's. They're going to remain there. They're privately owned, but they are not well preserved. And we're having difficulty with that because we are not able to get grants for things that are on privately owned property at this point. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on that. The second thing is that we have this local ordinance that we were able to get passed in 2015. And it covers historic preservation, but it requires an addendum. So this is one of those things in looking at the town code. As we went through our trainings, which we arranged with Preservation Buffalo Niagara, we found that we need to add some wording about the standards that are required by the U.S. Secretary of the Interior to make us eligible for federal, state, and private grants, and then for tax credits for some of the properties, if they should be named a state historical site or a federal historical site, then they could apply for tax credits from the state and federal governments, but they can't do that unless we are following the standards. So the advisory board has been invited to present that information to the town board on March 15th at their workshop meeting. And I'm sending a statement to them prior to the meeting. So we anticipate that this will go past without any difficulty, but they do have to run it by Pete Godfrey in order to make sure that it's legal wording. We talked about the security of records for the preservation board, and the town provided new space for the town historian's office. It has a locked facility and more storage ability, and it's located at the Nike base. And then we reported on the protection of artifacts, and the New York State Parks Department provided more storage space at River Lee in an outbuilding there. And Riverly is still under consideration by the New York State Parks Office for recognition as a historic site on the state level, but it's been slowed down by COVID restrictions since the people from the Preservation Office haven't been able to come to visit. So that's just background information. And then I want to tell you current activities, because the board met last week. And the major topic of discussion that I brought up was Ferry Village. So we have requested and received a copy of the original master plan with the Ferry Village plan in it. And then I've spoken to Sharon Nichols, who was on the committee when they redid it according to what Ferry Village wanted. So she has a copy of that. We are developing a plan to pursue the naming of Ferry Village as an historic district. And our understanding from Buffalo Preservation is that we don't have to have anyone from Ferry Village say that they want this, that we can name it an historic district without getting the permission of any homeowner. Doesn't mean they have to do anything. It's just that we are able to say this is an historic district. I'm going to check with the people there just to be sure, but my understanding was that, and that's what other people thought from the training that we did too. So that would, just getting a named and historic district would help in proceeding with this.
June, can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
Even if they don't have to agree or whatever the language is, what impact would that have on homeowners if they wanted to do anything to their home if the district was considered a historical district? Because if your home is a historical home, you have to jump through all kinds of hoops to have anything done to it. So what would happen to the homeowners with this district-wide historical designation?
Well, we wouldn't be able to tell a homeowner exactly what they can do. And we don't want to do that anyway. It would only be exterior anyway, not anything interior that we would be talking about. But even with exterior changes to a house, unless it has been actually identified as an historic property, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But what you're hoping for, if you set aside a district, is that the people who live in that area will want to then participate in that. And it's more an awareness kind of activity at this point, just to get people to think about it that way. I'm not expecting miracles. Nothing's going to happen overnight with this, but I'm just trying to get it to the point where people will say, okay, we've been named an historic district. Now what do we do? You know, how are we going to do something with this? So that's where we are at this point about doing it.
Martha, that was a great question, and you beat me to that one. But one more thing I'd like to ask June, if you don't mind, before you leave that.
Sure.
Does designating that a historical district open up the residents there to any maybe grants or funding opportunities to fix up their properties?
Absolutely, and that's part of what, I'm going to go into that more, Pete, but it is definitely.
Okay, good.
That's why we needed the change in the ordinance, because if we can get this named in historic district and we can get the ordinance changed, then we are eligible for a lot of grants that are available federally, statewide, privately, but we can't do it without the 10 standards that the Secretary of the Interior said. So yeah, it would lead into a lot of other things and grants for upkeep on the waterfront. There's all sorts of things that we could do, landscaping, et cetera. Even if it weren't on private property, there's a lot of other things that could be done if we get it named.
So would the private landowners and homeowners have an opportunity to tap into that?
Yes, oh yes, because there are tax credits available from both the feds and the state. And if you're part of an historic district and you decide you want to have your house included in that, and you want to apply for grants to do, you can get grants for roofing and siding and all sorts of things like that, as long as you're willing to kind of stay within the parameters of the historic district.
Very good.
So
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? If you are then included in the historic district, you have to opt in your dwelling to be part of the historic district, even though it's in it already, because the code right now is saying that in order for it to be a historic district, the properties there would have to agree to it. But if you do it without their agreement, would the requirements and what can be done and can't be done on their property, town board or approval, would those change? Would that, or would you saying?
No, they
Right
would,
now, the code, it's an historic district, you need permission to do anything. If it's a historic district with approval of the property owners. If you do it without their approval, then will that change that they could opt in to being part of it? That's designation I'm looking at, because you're doing it without their permission.
what they would still have to opt into is for their specific piece of property. They could
That's what
be, yeah, they would be
Yeah, that's what I
in,
wanted to
they
know.
would just be included in the historic district, but their house or property would not necessarily be named an historic property. So they would not be eligible for any of the tax credits unless they chose to actually have their personal property included. But they would still be considered part of the historic district. Any other
But they wouldn't
questions
be
about
held
that?
to the requirements of any ups on it then, unless they were part of it. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up before we.
I know it's going to be, that's the major issue with most of this stuff. I realize it. So the original committee that worked on the old master plan is going to be asked again, anyone who's still around and willing to do it, to serve on a subcommittee of the Historic Preservation Board. And we're going to discuss what's changed since their work was done, what can be done now to kind of expedite this matter, and who among the property owners in Ferry Village would be the most important to include in this discussion. Many of the major problems in appearance in Ferry Village were discussed, and some of those will be documented in the future. But one of the things that came up is that we need to have a discussion with the town zoning board about some of the things that people are concerned about there. And apparently the zoning officer does not on a regular basis take a look at properties around town. Our understanding is it's only if someone raises a complaint that the zoning officer would go and perhaps issue a warning of some kind. Now, we're not trying to tell everybody what to do with their property, but if you're going to be in an historic district and the town zone doesn't cover at least some basics about what a place should look like, then we're going to have to take a look at the town ordinance and see what the code is all about. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about. There are some older buildings there where we know a lot of work needs to be done. And in some cases, the property isn't cared for very well. And so that's one of the issues that we're probably going to be raising. Nobody ever wants to hear it, I know that, but it's part of the history of the town. And so we're going to be raising the issue as we go through this. We are developing, or we have developed, a list of all the historic properties in Ferry Village Hamlet area, and we will be researching those a little bit further, but we have all of the addresses for each of these places. And I'm going to take a walking tour as soon as we get a nice day with Sharon Nichols so that we can wander around the whole place and try to figure out what would be the priorities and where we should start with talking to the owners about this. One of the things we did talk about is if you're going to have a village area, how would you make that look coordinated? And that's part of what the plan says too. So for appearances, we were talking about the possibility of signage, something that would say something like "Welcome to Ferry Village," the historic old area, Grand Island, whatever the wording would be. The possibility of lighting, so that it had lamp posts, let's say, all the way down this ferry road or something like that, and along the waterfront. That's the kind of thing that we would want to look at, because that's where we could apply for grant money once we get this change in the town ordinance. Then we could apply for grant money that would perhaps pay for some of that sort of thing once we get an overall plan done about that. The other things that people were talking about, are things about public awareness. What do we do? There are some people that have lived on the island forever and know about Ferry Village, and this is not going to be anything new to them. But we have a lot of people who live on this island who have no idea about the history of that area. So we're looking at the possibilities of a public relations campaign that would not just include people in Ferry Village, or people who are interested in just history, but the entire town. What can we do about that? So there are a lot of ideas that were raised in that area. And then a number of activities have been suggested that would increase visits to the area and to the island. And some of these might include new business ventures. One of the things we talked about would be that maybe somebody on the island would be interested if we could figure this out and there were a piece of property available to open an antiques and collectibles shop of some kind that would bring people down to the Ferry Village area, but give them something to do besides eat ice cream on the dock and fish fries at the Village Inn. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're trying to think of other things that people could do. And in that case, we would want to have the Chamber of Commerce working with us so that we could figure out who might be a prospect for this sort of thing, what would it take, and so on. So it was just one of the many ideas that came up about this. And then the connection to boating in the area. If the docks are available and historically appropriate eventually, we talked about the idea of connecting to the canal side activities in Buffalo. Not on a regular basis. We know that a ferry service is not going to run it. Somebody tried it before and there's not enough demand for that. But possibly a couple of times in a summer, you could arrange to have something like the Buffalo History Boat have a special tour where they would bring people from Canal Side over to Ferry Village and give them a certain number of hours to eat, drink, buy things, whatever, if we had it set up that way. And then take them back to Buffalo so that we wouldn't depend just on people who live on the island, but it would bring people in from off island also. And
Jill,
yes,
I think that's a wonderful idea. The other thing I've thought about is having like a boat ride where people pay a little bit for it and they go out and they go around Strawberry Island and or go by Strawberry and motor and get some explanation about what's going on there naturally.
yes, that's a great idea. And I'm sure we could work some, actually, I know the Hillman family and they run the Spirit of Buffalo and the History Boat and the bike ferry downtown and whatever. And so if there were enough interest in this, I could talk to Rick and see if he and his mom wouldn't be interested in doing something. It wouldn't be an everyday thing, certainly, but we might be able to work something out, you know, so that it would work occasionally to do that sort of thing. We'd also want to tie into the BLC, the Buffalo Launch Club, because they have that antique boat show every once in a while, and that would also be a part of waterfront activity. So we'd want to coordinate with them to do that kind of thing. I'm also, if anybody knows of any, I'm looking for descendants that may live on the island or even in the town of Wanders or whatever of ferry boat captains, because we thought this would be another interesting thing to bring to people's attention. And if we have people like that living on the island, those may be people who would help to support this idea and help us to get it going and talk to people around the island to make the changes that would be necessary. Let's see, let me see. Oh, Jim, you may know the answer to this. Someone said they thought that there was a small piece of property down there that the town actually owns. It runs out to the river between the park. Is that correct?
The old end of Cox Road.
Foot of Cox Road.
The end of Cox Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know how much land it is or
A
approximately?
little bit. You could have a parking lot there and you could have a pier.
I think I heard that the amount was 66 feet of water frontage. And it adjoins the state parkland.
Okay, good to know.
So
Okay,
I'd
'cause
like
we were,
the,
yeah,
that state's parkland that adjoins to would have been what the old Offerman estate was sitting on.
okay, that's good, because we were talking about the Offerman, because we've been working with that family off and on, trying to get enough information. They sent a lot of clippings and things so that we could possibly get one of those historic signs put there eventually with the Parks Department. And so that would connect all of that area. So we're trying to see how we can get several of the historic sites connected, not just Ferry Village, but the things around it. One of the other things is that because River Lee is so close in Beaver Island State Park, and there is a path that runs through there and comes through the gates into the River Lee property in the park. Hopefully, if we can get Ferry Village established as an historic district, we can then connect the pathways. And I know the state parks wouldn't want anybody just wandering in there through the back of the park, but maybe we could set up some sort of system so that they would be able to do that, even if it's on a walking tour through Ferry Village with River Lee included in that kind of thing. But anyway, those are just some of the ideas that we've come up with. The subcommittee is pulling together. Town Hall is working with us to make sure that we have all the information we need from the old master plan. And as I said to Jim, Joe, the chair, he's always concerned about ruffling feathers. I'm not. I told him I would be the bitch and we would get this done.
Come on now.
Okay, I got a couple of things for you, June.
Okay.
One, you're on the brink of actually doing something that's much bigger within the comp plan, and that is actually developing a hamlet design for the village itself, which is an all-comprehensive review of the entire village that will define everything that you spoke of: the business element, the residential element, the attractions within it, the access to the river. All that is under, if you were to activate doing a hamlet design for the village itself. It would also put in play the recommendations as to what kind of zoning needs to be modified to make sure that the village remains a village and not become a standard subdivision within the community of Grand Island.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the issues we like to have a conversation with then is with the committee that you're actually organizing could be the beginning of the backbone to develop it, because that's the only way a hamlet will develop, if it has participation of the people who live in the hamlet. And in the master plan itself, we are calling for a hamlet to be in Ferry Village. So therefore, if they like that concept, I think that we should really move down that road. That would take in the issue of lighting, that would take in the issue of signage, it would come in the issue of building a performance standards within the historical district. It would define everything you're asking for in one simple, straight document. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Jim, if I
Okay.
could just,
Yes.
Jim, if I could add to what you're saying there, you know, I hate to keep always going back to zoning, but I know there's been a couple issues there that I've been privy to in the past 2 years.
Yep.
where, you know, the buildings don't particularly meet the zoning they're in. They're not conforming. Then people want to add on to them, and they meet, you know, opposition to that because doesn't really fit in our zoning. However, most of that was built pre-zoning. And the lot lines are not exactly the way they are everywhere else. So to your point, as a hamlet, it almost needs its own zoning code, you know,
Yes.
and its own zoning rules
Yes.
to keep its character. Because if you govern it by what we have on the books now, it's going to turn into everything else.
Yeah, somebody mentioned at the meeting the other day that some of those lots are only 35 feet
Yes.
across. So, you know, in order to maintain the historic feel of the whole area, you don't want to change that to require 100-foot lots to build something. So we understand that, and we've already just, not that we know all the details, mind you, but we did discuss that at the meeting.
I would like
ahead.
to see you move that direction. Go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry.
The one I think of in particular was actually a very, very old house that was a two-family home. And it's not zoned properly down there for a two-family home. Somebody bought it very dilapidated. It was willing to fix it up, but code enforcement said you can't have a two-family home down there. It has to be a one-family. Well, that's not what it was. And the guy was willing to do that, just a larger single family home, but it turned into a mess. You know, it really, I mean, it was trips to the ZBA. He was in town hall a dozen times trying to figure out what was what. It was just, I felt bad because he was walking away from what it was, you know, so.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's why I really feel, and in the 1998 master plan, which you have now, I hope, gotten a copy of, that is the section on Ferry Village.
Right.
That basically was, let's say that could become part of the conversation, but it shouldn't be the beginning and ending of the conversation. It should just be information to make determination going forward. But I also will share with you, I most likely have all past comments that were done in 1985 to 1995 to 1998 before the adoption. So I have the surveys. I'm pretty sure I have the surveys. I'm pretty sure I have all the letters that were sent for testimony for and against. I think I may have all that. I don't
Okay,
think
that would be great.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great piece to have, because you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, because you would turn around and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that and that and that. I had a lot of great deal of letters dealing with Ferry Village, and there's a conversation about the master plan and what they were doing. I think that would be very beneficial. But I really feel that this is a great stepping off point to really do something significant, to the point where you have an actual document that basically defines Ferry Village, that is made up of the people who live in it, to illustrate not only to Ferry Village, but illustrate to the other 5 locations on Grand Island on how you would participate to actually create a hamlet design for a particular spot on Grand Island. I think that if the people down there are willing to be looking at this to preserve what I think is a village, is one of the beginning villages, I think it's a fantastic opportunity here for everybody.
Well, if you find those, I'd love to see them.
I will dig them out. They're in a file probably about 10 deep here. Unfortunately, when I was a councilman in the 90s, my wife is saying to me, when you die, I'm just going to back a truck up to the house and you're going to see all those file cabinets go out the door. I'm sure it's all in there. And I'm almost certain I didn't throw anything away. So I would love to turn around and pass that out and get that out of the archives here and give it to all.
Oh, good. Add it to my archives in my den.
Well, my wife will love it that these 2 big boxes will leave the room. I think that she'll love that
I
part.
spent COVID trying to clean out my house. Now you're trying to fill it up again.
Oh, no, we'll take it over. No, we'll take it to Sharon's house. Okay, is that okay?
Well, if anybody has any other ideas you want to pass on to me, I'd be happy to hear them. This was a beginning with, I mean, this committee has talked about this forever, but to tell you the truth, I went in with a whole bunch of questions and just sort of said, we have to get moving on this, and we want to get a timetable set up and get busy doing this. I mean, as Jim says, it's been talked about since the 1980s. It's time to move on it.
It is. It really is.
It took 15 years to get the first ordinance passed. I found out after I got on the board that they hadn't done it for 11 years. And so, like I say, I don't mind being called names. I will just go right ahead and do it. So if you have questions or concerns, or you have any ideas for us, I'd be happy to hear them.
Okay,
Can't think of them tonight, send them to me.
You have 2, so I want to address it broken into 2 parts, okay? Part 1 is looking at beginning the performance standards of Ferry Village. The second issue is the legislation for historical preservation, which is not only just affecting Ferry Village, it's affecting all historical objectives for the community of Grand Island. So you have 2 things you've actually put on the table. So I like to address them. And as you talk to the issue here, try to specify which one you're actually addressing. With that, Diane.
Oh, I just wanted to compliment June and her group. You've touched on a lot of interesting stuff. So I think it's great what you've already come up with.
Well, there's a lot of good thinking going on. It's a matter of getting the motion going now.
Yeah,
You
I
know, It's
understand.
always that way when you're starting something, so.
Right.
Paul?
June, just to spitball, I mean, go go ahead.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Joan, are you there? Okay, I was just thinking, what would you think about expanding the historic district to include Motor Island out there? You do have the remnants of the chimney from the old Frog Island Bar, which was part of the clubhouse for the original yacht club that was there. And so it does have some elements of cohesion and contact with the ferry village area. Then there were ferry boats that went back and forth between those islands when they had the boat races and so on during the beginning of the 1900s. So I was just wondering if you would like to consider that, or you had any ideas about that.
Well, I know it was included in the original plan. It's listed with everything, both Ferry Village and Motor Island, but I wasn't clear, I guess, about what we would be even allowed to do at this point, because doesn't the state own that and keep it
Yeah.
as a natural preserve or something?
Yeah, it's a wildlife management area. It's owned by the state. However, there is that chimney, though, is still a historic remnant of the original development that was there. I
Uh-huh.
think it would be cooperative with you. I mean, and the fact that you throw it into your district and keep it apart there, it makes it open for grants. If the chimney falls down, or if they want to restore the original bunkhouse or something like that, it's in an area where there isn't much ecological activity, so it could be done. But right now, it's just a visual aid there that if we took trips around, I know Diane suggested the natural features, but actually there's a tremendous amount of offshore history there too, that I bring up when I do the eco tours, and they should all be incorporated into your whole plan here.
Okay. I'll make note of
Eric
that
has
with
a
the
blue
group.
hand up.
What's that?
I got a digital hand up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
There you go. Oh, sorry. I couldn't find that hand. Sorry there, buddy.
It's all right. It's okay. Less of me is always better. But I do have a quick question. Is there an actual definition, like on a map, of what Ferry Village is? Is it like ferry to that Allentown? Is it defined yet, or how, does it go up and include Anchor, or how far?
Yeah, basically it goes from Beaver Island State Park over to the Buffalo Launch Club. And it's Ferry Road and essentially follows East River over to, I don't know, I can't remember if it's Bush or
Ferry. Well, it's
Ferry. I think it's Ferry.
Ferry.
So is that
It would actually be like where the Launch Club is, all that whole section all the way over to Beaver Island State Park.
Right.
okay, great. I'm just curious if that's defined anywhere. I put a note in the side, but I actually just hit Wikipedia real quick and was surprised that there's one sentence under Ferry Village, and that's it, that it's a hamlet in the state of New York. There's no,
Yeah.
it's very weird to have no info. So it goes to your point, like work is needed for PR, public information. And that's usually a really good way to get information back from around the world, is to send it out to something like Wikipedia and ask people who are descendants of and spread out in the world to comment back. It's all user driven. So I just found it interesting that there's not more info there. And as a non-native islander, only 15 years here, I would tell you, until I ate at the Village Inn, I didn't know there was a thing called Ferry Village. And I would tell you, a whole lot of people, I think, need this PR. It would be a really great thing to do, because I don't think most have any idea.
I agree. I'm not a native islander either. They tell me I didn't go to kindergarten here, so I'm not a Grand Islander, but I've owned this house for 35 years. But it really wasn't until we started writing that book that I learned a lot of the things that I did about the island, because we had to research so much of it. And I've always thought it was a shame, really. And people come up to me all the time and say, wow, I didn't know that. I wish I knew more about it. Or when we did the little things at the Schoolhouse 5 and people would bring their kids in and ask about it. They had no idea about the history of the island. So I think we really do have a lot of work to do ahead of us to get people to agree with this sort of thing.
Well,
Hey, June, too, one last thought. I know in Gizba specifically, it's not a primary mission, but one of them was local pride and getting kids at a young age to get really in. And there's in the school, no local component, super local component. And it's something I think maybe we should also ask the school, if we had enough data to give them, if they could incorporate some curricular information that would help, help
Yeah.
to educate the kids a little bit.
Well, it's funny you say that because we do a fourth grade tour because that's the grade in which they learn local history. And so I often serve as one of the tour guides for that. And we do take them around, but they don't necessarily, they go through Ferry Village because they see where Tucker's store was and where the switchboard operator lived and that kind of thing. But one of the other things that we did talk about was the possibility of having scouts or the school system or whatever, pick up on this, and maybe they could do, kids could do a project for, I don't know what they call it anymore, social studies or whatever, and research one building or one property or something like that for credit in school. And that would get us more information and it would get all the kids involved in it. And when the kids get involved, then their parents get involved. That's one of the things we found out with these fourth grade tours, that if you give a fourth grader a tour and you send them home with a list of all the places on Grand Island, their parents are much more apt to drive around the island and look for these things, and they didn't even know about it. So there, we know we've been at this for a long time, but we're trying to come up with even more ideas now.
Right, Judy?
In 6th grade, I know this is going back quite a ways for me at Sidway, we read Cinderella Island. That was one of the requirements that we had in 6th grade. And that was going on for quite a while. I mean, I can't remember exactly when Rob Roy McLeod wrote Cinderella Island, but and it was interesting, and we had to do a project on it, and that was in 6th grade. And I think it could be part of their social studies curriculum or their whatever it is now. I have no idea. I haven't had kids in school in a long time. So, but I was in 6th grade in the late 50s, so we won't even. So I don't know when they discontinued it. Probably when the high school opened.
We won't even talk about where I was in the late 50s.
But anyway, it was interesting, and of course I've lived here all my life, so I know a lot about the history, or actually I was the history, I think. But I think that's a good place to start. We have Cinderella Island. June, you have too, I believe, right? A history of Grand Island, and didn't you write a history?
Yes.
I think I have that book.
And I have a
pretty sure I
copy of
have it.
Cinderella Island, and I have a copy of, I have anything that was written over the last probably 50 or 75 years, I have a copy of it. So we could take things from that. I think I'm talking about the school kids. It would not just be papers, but I'm thinking about kids who are interested in theater. There used to be a theater here on the island, the old barn that as I understand it, that burned down was the Long families. Kids might be able to write skits about various things that happened in the history of Grand Island. I'll tell you one crazy idea that I had that I didn't put into this report, but I suggested to people, is if you know anything about the squatters who first settled on Grand Island and were driven off by the Erie County Sheriff and his band of militia, this is way before the Erie Canal went through.
Yep.
They burned all their homes in December and forced them to leave, and they moved for the most part to Canada. One of them was Sylvester Pendleton Clark, and he is the person who started the town of Pendleton, named for his middle name, which was his mother's maiden name. Well, I said to them, why can't, if the town owns some property down there, why couldn't we use that as a little park, have a bonfire there in December to commemorate the burning of the squatters' houses? People could go, whatever, they could snowmobile, they could, whatever they want, cross-country ski, whatever, but we could have a big bonfire and tell the story of what happened. I mean, I think we need something for every season on the island. And so I'm trying to think of things we could do that would draw people down there. So the boats in the summer, I was laughing and saying, maybe we could get the Cotter involved for a really frigid winter trip across the water.
Yeah. Then you have the barrel that went down the river to define our border between us and Canada. Okay, Paul, you're up.
I was just saying, you had mentioned having the bonfire and so on up in Black Rock. They actually, during the War of 1812, they dress in the uniforms and fashions of the time, and they have a burning there because there was a ship that was burned during the war right off the shoreline there.
Aha.
And so that's been done quite a few times, and that would be that Black Rock Historical Society was involved in that.
And they would be good partners for this because they were the ones that were involved with the whole thing when we did the Eagle Park thing too, because it was their people who were actually over here who drowned. It was people from Black Rock that drowned in the river. So they know about our historical society already. We've had some connections with them.
Yeah. Pete, what do you got?
Yeah, so June, I really applaud you and your group for all this work you've been doing. It's really great, and it's really important for us to preserve and understand our history. I'm really intrigued by this whole resurgence to kind of bring Ferry Village back to its village aspects, and I really would like you to see you get the buy-in of the people down there, because I think once they saw it and understood it, they would really embrace it. Just a thought for maybe your committee, maybe to put together some sort of I don't know, presentation of historical facts of the area or something. Maybe get together with the launch club and invite the whole neighborhood down. Show them what you're thinking, show them what you found. I think it'd really be a good like a mixer, and sort of get some buy-in from them. Because if you had buy-in from the the residents, I think there's nothing you couldn't do.
Yeah, actually, I think we're going to do something like that, Pete. At least that was on our list because we know we have to get the people who live down there involved in this. We're interested in that Rose Cottage that's on Ferry Road. It's across the street, well, not directly across the street, but opposite the Village Inn on the other side of the street. And there's that big lot where people park their cars. But as I understand it, they don't actually own that lot. It belongs to the same woman who owns the Rose Cottage and the hot dog stand. So we're hoping to get people like that involved and on this committee because they are the people that have the most commercial interest down there. And if we can get them and then get some of the homeowners, we're never going to sway everybody. And we know that.
No.
But, if we can get just a core group even of people who are in favor of doing this and get it started, I think that will be helpful.
I think you're going to find that the lady that owns that parcel with Rose House is going to be very much wanting to work with you on this because that's the issue that Pete's been working on for quite a while.
Funny you mentioned that cottage.
Exactly. I mean, I work with Pete on that problem, and it's still not it's still unresolved because we consider it it's considered what they call non-conforming at the moment. And because they want to do something, they're basically caught in the non-conforming. If they start to do anything other than what they are, they're going to become something else, and then the rules start to come down on them about, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. If you would have stuck with what you were doing before, you may have been all right. That's why it's so important, I think, that we establish some guidelines for the village that's kind of unique to the rest of the island. I mean, it really did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pinned the tail on the donkey there. Holy smokes.
Didn't even know what I was doing.
No, you did good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Pete and I have been around a long time, so we both pretty much grew up on Grand Island. Pete was born here, I wasn't. But I got planted here at the age of 16. So as a teenager, I was all over the place. But the issue comes down to is we know the flavor, we know the village, we know what's down there, we know what was down there, and we know, the people that live there personally. So the issue is we understand the ramifications because we look at the bigger picture as a community planners, and we then look at the village and say, warning, we need to do something.
Yeah.
Even though they look at it sometimes as being, no, you're trying to be progressive in the village and we want it to stay the way it is. That's not the motivation here at all. The motivation is we grew up, we understand what it is, we know who's there, and we know we want to protect it. And I think that we'd love to meet with them if they would like to have a meeting with us to turn around and talk about the village, because I think that would be useful too, to talk about what is possible, but what needs to be planned. I mean, that's the key. And when you open the door of planning, I think that's when people get suspicious. I always said that if you had a good plan, your equity would be guaranteed. But the response when I would talk equity, they turn around and say, well, equity's fine, but we're not selling. So equity doesn't mean anything. And I understand that perfectly. But equity means that you have investment within the village that is going to be used in a positive manner, because somebody's going to do something somewhere down the line. Somebody's going to do something. If Ferry Village wanted to expand, which they did because they actually went and had to get a parking lot to keep their business in business. So they actually went into the lot across the street and leased the property from the woman across the street to actually have a parking lot for the Village Inn. In any other circumstance, the town of Grand Island would say, no, you need to provide your own parking on your own property, not turn around and leasing property for somebody else to turn around and have an alternative parking. So they did work that out, but that was because there was a lot of torture of them saying, well, you're stepping outside of the mold, and therefore everybody had to jump through a lot of hoops. They had to do a lot of explaining. They had to do a lot of paper and so on and so forth. We really need to, I think, do it. And I applaud what you're doing. And I'm excited about the fact that you're doing something that is preserving what history of Grand Island is there. In the beginning, when we did the master plan, they felt like they weren't part of the conversation, but they always were part of the conversation. And I apologize if they felt that they weren't part of it. But I have a very strong sense of what historical value our community has, because you cannot go forward if you don't know where you've been. So to me, it's very important. What you're doing is very important to me.
Thanks. Well, we certainly
Anything I
think.
can do to help you, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Pete. I appreciate that. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Fire away. Anybody got questions? You mean we exhausted questions on June?
Wow,
Wait a minute.
amazing.
I
And
didn't
I
want
could
this-
talk forever, you know.
I wanted to go on for 2.5 hours and beat on June. This is not happening.
Actually,
Not me, huh? I've got good notes here.
That's good. I will add some more things. I've had some conversations, and I had Paul with me when we did it, talking about trails and paths and so on. And into the conversation, Paul made it very clear in our comment to the state parks that they put a nice path in from Ferry Village going down the riverside to hit the historical, hitting River Lee, but they put down the wrong rock. They put down the wrong stone to actually make it a nice walking path. You could break your ankle there. And the issue was, why haven't you done something that really makes it more accommodating for being a true path that people can actually walk on, or at least maybe ride on with a bike? And then you have a second path that goes through that weaves through the woods behind the old estate that actually comes out to the circle. I don't know if you're aware of that, but
Yeah.
there's actually two paths that are actually in Ferry Village that we should be addressing. And I think that's a bigger conversation for Pete and the Recreation Committee to actually address and maybe get into the conversation with Ferry Village as well as state parks going forward.
so,
Are you talking about the Spalding Trail as well as,
Yeah, I'll let Paul
Yes.
turn around and address it.
because the Spalding
I-
Trail, yeah, go ahead.
you know, the Spalding Trail's got a lot of flood problems, and they've got mud in
Right.
the centered base there. And what I did is, remember a while ago, we were tasked to go out and look at the Beaver Island trails and do a report on the condition of those trails. I sent you the copy that I did, but I didn't go through the whole park. But I recognize the one along the backside of the East River Marsh is really a mess. They did a good job of fixing the drainage, but nobody there seemed to understand that somebody in a wheelchair or a bicycle or even someone who's incapacitated in some way could walk on that surface because it's all rocks. And some of these pieces of rock that they used in there are probably 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter. So it's pretty big stuff. It's not compacted down. So I raised the issue about that trail and the one that is called the Spalding Trail, which goes up the other way. And they were very amenable to looking at something doing something about that. They actually didn't know that condition existed, at least they knew about Spalding, but they didn't know about the other trail. So, and those trails are good connectors to get Ferry Village people over to Riverly and Riverly back again, you know. So it's not a way to sneak into the park without paying the fare. It's just a way that you can get into some really scenic landscape along the river there, along those two corridors. So I think that the message has been delivered by Jim and I to the head of state parks in the region here. And I believe that they committed to actually doing something about it. Now, how long it takes, who knows, but we'll see.
And the other two things I want to bring to your attention is that was the walking trail addressing within the Ferry Village area. You've also had a discussion with the Blue Way, which is the green, like it's a complement to the Greenway Commission. And they're looking for locations to actually, a waterway or Blue Way is basically looking at water traffic or water tourism and that kind of stuff. And Ferry Village was one of our conversations about the village itself, the landing. There's where your tourism component that you were discussing could be addressed. And if you're on the Greenway path, that would get people to know you. And also Greenway has been working with Pete in the town board right now to work on signage. So you might want to talk to Pete about the signage project that's going on in Grand Island in concert with the Greenway. And
Okay,
then,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Actually, this idea of signage came up at the meeting when we were talking about that, because I knew that there was that hopefully we would be bringing it all together and not have signs of every which color and design all over the place. Because the Historic Society and the board are talking about having some signs put in for a couple of other things. And I suggested they wait until we get some guidance on that.
right. And
June,
Pete
June,
can
just,
address that one now if you like to.
just,
Yeah, so we have been having a lot of interaction with Greenway, and the big thing they're kind of working on right now is they want to basically modify the trail to the town center. They want to identify the shoreline trails, West River, of course, but they want to modify the town center trail, which basically what it looks like they're kind of going after is coming down Grand Island Boulevard from the South Bridge. You would get to Whitehaven. You would go down the side of Whitehaven, make a right on Baseline, a left back on Grand Island Boulevard, and then when you got to Bedell, you would make a right and then a left into the linear path. So it's kind of modifying that town center trail a little bit. And they're looking for some signage. It's actually going to have some distances on it to explain the shoreline trail, to explain the town center trail. So it's kind of our first go around with them. We approved some funding for some signs to get them started. They've been very, very proactive with us, working with us well. They keep, in fact, Greg Stevens keeps calling me, hey, how about we put a trail here? You know, he's even coming up with ideas now, and they're not bad ones, you know, and they're very, I won't say they're pie in the sky, but they're big visions, which is really good. So I think we're in a really good place. Personally, I feel with Greenway right now, they're really looking at us hard because we have so much, I guess, on the books, you know, with the long range plan. And they see the value of Grand Island, and they see the value of, you know, our trails and the potential we have for trails and stuff. So I'm really comfortable with where things are going with them right now. They're really working good with us, you know.
Yeah, and the biggest issue though I have for Ferry Village is the time, because the signage and what they're going to do, they're going to come up with a base design. So the base design that can be used on the trail system that can be used all over Grand Island should be used in Ferry Village as well to show consistency of design. Yeah.
Crawford met with Carlos, which is their sign guy, through Greenway, and they had some meetings and they had some discussions about some stuff. And we approved some funds for signs, and it's kind of through their whole program. But I know that Crawford worked like directly with them on it, so he could probably answer a few more questions on the sign.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to get recognized here.
I see a hand up over there.
Couple of things.
Well, Eric has his up too, so.
Yeah, I know, and I even found out
Why
how to
don't I
put an
see Eric's
electronic hand
hand?
up.
I see a yellow hand up. Okay, go ahead.
Just keep in mind that when I was on the Greenway Commission, we put together with the county, the design standards for signage. So there's a consistent set of design standards for all the different kinds of signs that could possibly be used in the Niagara River Greenway. So if the Greenway is involved in this and the Greenway is going to have their logo and their kind of information on there, you just follow those sign standards. So in June, if you have historical stuff that gets connected to that, you can do the same thing so that you don't have to keep reinventing sign designs as you go along.
Yeah.
And June, if you're putting your report together and you need any historic photographs, I've got quite a few that we've had kind of assembled from research when we were doing the historic presentations at the Launch Club. I can make those available to you. You'd let me know what you want. There are quite a few.
Oh, that's great, because I really was going to try to talk to somebody there to see how we could make use of all the history that I know that they have, the
Well, yeah, there's
materials
a
and all that.
fellow
sort
there
of-
that, yeah, there's a fellow there named Tom Frondheim, who's a good friend of mine.
Uh-huh.
Tom is Frondheim, I don't know, how to spell that, Fraunhei. I can, if you get in contact with me, I can give you his email
Okay.
and this phone number.
I think I've met him at one of the meetings there, but I don't know him, so that's good. Yeah.
They have, he's got up in the upstairs there in the clubhouse, they've got quite a number of different photographs. And of course, we've
Yeah.
got a lot of stuff digital as well.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing that's come up recently too, which is probably relevant to Ferry Village, is there's been a whole bunch of historical publications in the Niagara Muskie Association's monthly letters
Uh-huh.
about fishing in the upper Niagara. That's ice fishing, everything from ice fishing to fish pirates. And fish
What is a
pirates are the guys
fish
that you,
pirate?
pirates, like, you know, har, you know,
What is a fish
What
pirate?
is a fish pirate?
pirates are the ones in the early 1900s that couldn't rely on nets and fishing poles. It was too slow, so they used dynamite. And they
Oh, my goodness.
they were engaged in what they call market fishing. So they would put these things out and they would kill several hundred to 1,000 fish at a time and make a fortune. And
Do you
of
know the
course, in the
time element on that, Paul?
early
you know that?
1900s. Early 1900s.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And there's a whole series of articles in there that were done by a friend of mine from over at the Niagara Muskie Association. And I kept all those copies. They're all digital, so I can get those to you if you're interested as well.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So,
Well, the other thing we could work
Right.
on would be Western, all the Western New York Heritage magazines and whatever are always looking for articles too. So I thought if we get enough material together, I've written articles for some of those magazines before, so perhaps I could get them to accept one on Ferry Village and
Sure.
what we're doing over here.
so
Pete,
what-
before you go, I'm gonna give to
Eric,
Eric.
I can't hear him. He's got his,
Microphone.
Sorry, I didn't know if we were ending the meeting or ending the topic. So I have a totally unrelated to Ferry Village thing, if you want to wait till the end, just to, or
All right,
should I
let's
go
do
ahead?
that. All right, let's go to that. Pete?
Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to bring up from the signs, and I hate to say this, but I'm a bit of an old soul, so this isn't my thing. But there was a lot of conversation about potentially including some QR codes in some of these signs.
yeah,
And Eric, you might have some interest in this because it would actually maybe be something that the chamber would spearhead from the business standpoint to kind of show where certain businesses are along this path. So, you know where to go get a pizza and stuff like that. June, to your world, QR codes could be potentially, this is this house and here's a little bit of history. And,
Yes.
you scan it with your phone and it comes up. And then you can do your self-guided tours and stuff like that, which is kind of neat.
Yes.
So, and that was all part of the discussion. And that was kind of we'll get back to that. We'll circle around because I don't think the Greenway nor the town of Grand Island wants to sponsor businesses, for advertisement. And that's where Eric, hopefully, maybe that crosses into your world. But in this case, in a historic wayfinding type situation, it might be interesting.
Yeah. One of the things that came up quite a bit is that because, in West River really felt this one, and that is that they started putting up all these bright orange or bright yellow line crossings and so on, which became sign pollution. So the biggest one, discussion about signage of Grand Island should be looking at the unintrusive signing, which means you really do want more of the QR coding on them so you can minimize the actual size of the sign in the information on the sign, but other than to say, this is this, this and this, but look at the Q, and then you'll be able to know more information about the rest of it. And I think there's been a great deal of discussion. Paul and I have talked about this to great length, and I think we had a conversation not too long ago with our buddy, from Greenway, Greg Stevens.
Greg
uh,
Stevens, yes.
about,
Greg,
about the very same thing. So I think that the signage, creating the signage to be, Pete, is probably a very, very important thing to be paying attention to on size, information, and that whole kind of thing. So
Mm.
that should be seriously looked at, not just haphazardly say, put anything you want on a sign. But the sign could get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you don't want them. So
Right, right.
I don't
Well,
think
that,
people-
yeah, that would be important. And I think down in Ferry Village, like, you know, as I say, they're talking about the Offerman property. And then somebody else is talking about some other kind of property. We don't want 15 signs all over the place. But if you had one or two that were spaced and then we used the technology rather than having more and more signs, you could have people take a little tour of the whole area with just what they would find on a couple of signs.
yeah, that's the important part.
I want to cut down on because I live on the West River, I know all about putting up way too many signs, way too many posts, way too many bright lights.
Yeah,
We don't want any more on Grand Island than what we've got already. I'm already fighting enough battles over here. I'm certainly not going to be charged with putting up signs in Ferry Village too.
yeah, it's called visual pollution. Judy?
Well, what I was going to say, because I do have a sign, I live on West River too, and I have a sign with right by Big Six. So there's a sign there, and it's a very nice sign because, we had Carlos at the, I think it was a master plan meeting, Pete, but it could have been a Parks and Rec meeting. I'm not really, that Carlos came and gave a presentation, and he showed us the signs that the state was going to use for the state parks were going to use and the colors they were using in their signs. And he emphasized to us that if we wanted to do signs similar to that, we had to pick our own color scheme and our own logo, and we shouldn't be duplicating what the town, what the state was using. That we could, we could set our own standards on what we wanted, but not use the same colors as the state was using. So
Oh.
that's just the thing I wanted to add in there. And Carlos is going to be working, like Pete said, with Dick Crawford, but I'm hoping if they're doing signs that they'll have the other stakeholders come in this time and talk to them, like Parks and Rec and Conservation. It's the meetings that they've had, we haven't, unless you've been there, Diane, if you've been in the meetings
No.
with Greg Stevens and Michelle.
No,
I mean, Michelle's on my, it's on my board, but the first I heard about was when somebody mentioned they had meetings. So I really would be in, as Parks and Recreation and Conservation and as historic and as Preservation Board, that I think we should be stakeholders in it too. There's and what's being put on.
Well, I think that all the committees need to really be thinking about this because it's going to impact everybody on the island and the look of the island. And so we don't want it to be haphazard looking. We want it to be, I'm a neat freak, so I want it to look nice when we get done. I don't want to see all kinds of craziness all over the place.
Yeah, if I can just interject a conversation we had specific to ideas at the chamber for directing people coming on to these different assets around the island, trails, everything. We kind of had an old idea, which was like a triptych, right? Like when you go, I'm going to go to AAA and go somewhere, they give me a map that outlines and they highlight everywhere I can go. Well, we wanted to kind of have that idea digitally. If you've seen these people play like a digital scavenger hunt game where your phone takes you to places, you get there, take a photo. So if you combine the two ideas, you don't have to really put up much signage at all because everybody from the age of 7 up has a phone now, or maybe younger than that. So if you can direct them before they get there to what they're seeing, historical content, they can take photos in place. So I really think it's an old idea, no offense meant to old ideas, to have a lot of signs anyway. When people aren't looking for signs, they're looking at their screens anyway. Just creating the digital content points to get them there. So we have a lot of dialogue at the chamber in the last 2 years about this. And if anybody wants to talk offline just about what products are out there or solutions to that, I think it's putting signs up now would be like, putting a Model T out for sale at Fusillo. It really, it's an idea that its time has gone away, both from a pollutionary standpoint and from a usability. People aren't looking for signs. So just thoughts, no offense meant to anybody, but we've had a lot of dialogue about it.
No,
Good.
I think you're right on. But one of the issues that when we first started the master plan committee back in 16, the bottom line is before we even hired a planner, we made a point of putting the committee together so they understood how it worked together and stuff like that. And the first thing we did was a walkabout, which was we brought a group in from Western New York called Western New York, Livable Western New York. And it's made up of lawyers and bankers and doctors and planners and that are all retired, and they all came to Grand Island to meet with the committee, and then did a walk through Grand Island, literally walking through Grand Island. And then after the meeting was all over, we had a report by them as to what they saw and what they felt was right and what they felt was wrong. And signage was the key one, because the first thing they said to us was, you really don't like visitors, do you? Because you allow them to come over the bridge, but then you don't tell them where to go. So you let them just wander around in the darkness, not understanding there's uniqueness that you would like them to see about you, but you really haven't even pointed it out to what they are. And so therefore, do you really want any visitors? Do you really want anybody to know this community at all? Because you really haven't paid attention to the bare essentials of direct people where you like to see them to go. But so I believe what you're doing, Eric, is basically we need to look at it. How do we get that information into a physical place for them to either see it on their phone or get a document for them to actually navigate Grand Island? I think that to me has always been important.
Jim, you forgot to mention, they said it looked like we built our town with no zoning.
Well, they did, but they also said that you have brutal technology, and
Yeah.
I kind of said brutal technology. Yeah, you're building your town hall is brutal technology. That's the actual design standards of that time. By the way, you have no building.
I believe there was a.
I should
there
give
was a- yeah,
everybody
there was
that
a,
document again so they can review it.
Yeah, there was a reference to it being like Soviet architecture.
Bunkers.
What's the time period?
It was the 60s. I think this is good. Any more for June? I think we've given you a lot of ideas, but you also give us a lot that we can sink our teeth into. I really would like to pursue this further down the road. I'd love to maybe have a joint meeting with them, with us, to talk about the opportunities, and then also look at doing something formally as developing a hamlet within the Ferry Village area, and actually make it a project and build a scope of work that we can actually turn around and maybe solicit a planner to actually work with us and work for grants to actually do the plan.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping.
Right. And so
Yeah,
I think there is funds to do this. That could be coming from the state, could be coming, from the State Department, it could come from the Erie County Planning Group. So to me, there's funds out there like we have the master plan and the LWRP that actually could create something positive. And we could have a planner work with the community to actually develop something very seriously and very objectively. With that, if nothing more questions for June. June, thank you very much. Don't go away.
Thank you, June.
Thank you.
welcome.
Joe.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thanks for all the feedback.
Sure.
I'm going to go back to Rhonda. Rhonda, I don't have my agenda in front of me, so do you tell me what's next?
Well, I just went through some of the past minutes, and a couple of things that were left outstanding for the committee to think on were ideas to rejuvenate the matrix and a plan for reporting on the matrix. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts you want to add tonight to keep that fresh.
I'm just going to smile and not say a word. I've made all my opinions known. It's time for somebody else to step forward and figure out how we want to address this, because my ideas honestly aren't going anywhere.
Oh, I think your ideas are going somewhere. I think this is my opinion from my perch, is that what we're doing and what we've done with transportation, the last meeting we had to talk about the complete streets and engaging in what's going on there and engaging with that committee that's moving forward. And again, tonight, we're working with June and engaging with another board, and again, with objectives for out of the master plan, and actually doing something and giving support to the groups that actually we're working with to accomplish objectives. So the next meeting, I would like to turn around and spend more time focusing on recreation, Judy,
Ooh,
to talk
okay.
about
Yeah,
what
we did talk. I did bring them up at our last meeting. Don't watch the meeting, but no, I'm just kidding. But we talk where, developing taking an inventory of what's available, that's been done. Putting a master plan forward, we're working on that. Getting what our long-term agenda is, we're working on that, right, Pete?
Yes.
And the other part of our matrix was developing more programs and opportunities with the school.
Mhm.
And I don't think I have to say too much more about that. That's been diminishing over the years. Right now, we can't really access the school much at all. During a normal year, we can get in mid-November, and now we have to be out until the end of February. It's only when school is in session, not when it's on vacation. And the pool on Sundays from 11 to 3 from November to April. And we're allowed to have the Kegabine gym, and I believe the middle school gym, if it's not taken by somebody else. So it's been a difficult scheduling for Joe's recreation programs in the winter to get anything done. So obviously the town has to look in a different direction at this point. So that's where we are with the matrix.
Hey,
Okay.
Judy, if I could just, in the state of the town,
Yes.
I had a Q&A with Dr. Graham, and one of the items I specifically pressed him on was access to facilities for the school, taking out the COVID factor. That's a smokescreen right now. Like when we're normal again,
Yep.
the fact that it's always been hard to reserve, hard to communicate, hard to access, perceived as not shareable at times. So just so you know, I can run some of that clips back to you, his responses of him committing to a much more open and a digital interface even to access those facilities. So I know it's a starting point, but I just want you to know that was a week ago. We really pressed him hard on that.
Well,
Okay.
their community ed programs are taking up more and more of the space in that school. So, they're expanding their programs and they're using their facilities for their programs, which makes it difficult for the town to be able to use that space. We can do this next week though, Jim, if you want to.
I do.
And I can get information. We can have maybe Joe could come too.
Okay.
But
one of the things that I would like to focus on, and I think it kind of will hit a lot of the bells that are inside of the comp plan itself on the matrix, is where do you stand on the master plan, recreational master plan? I know that committee was a standalone committee, and is moving towards being under the management now of the Recreation Advisory Board. If I see that being the fact, if it's not, tell me it's not the fact. But the issue is I like to see is where is that committee? Because I think that we need to look at it and find out if they're aggressively looking at past connections and what kind of plan they would like to see go forward on the ecotourism Grand Island. I mean, I think that's where it was kind of heading. So I was wondering if we could have a nice report on that piece of it that actually would take in all the issues of recreation. Does that make sense?
well, we could do that. I think you would want to include EDAB in the ecotourism because that requires
Yeah.
some marketing also, as well as, Joe's buying a whole bunch of kayaks for that. I mean, not a whole bunch. I don't know how many.
Yeah, we
they're
got
buying,
the
but they're
ones
going to
from
be
Blue
using
Water.
kayaks.
Yep.
So that part of the matrix too, and he's talking about he's CPR. Red Cross is certified to give safety courses, boater safety train, certified to give safe boating courses. I don't have the certification anymore. I gave mine up years ago, so I don't have that certification anymore. But yeah, that's something that the town can look into, because there is a new rule coming out that people are going to have safety in
Mhm.
in boat operation even over 6. So, you know,
Mhm.
I
Ac-
don't know when that goes
Actually,
into effect. but that's-
actually, everybody will have to have boater safety training that operates a motorboat eventually. It's being phased in.
Right, that's what I was talking about. Right.
Yeah.
So I
And-
would like to turn around at the next meeting, turn around and basically focus on recreational objectives and what's going on with the master plan itself. Then I would like to turn the following meeting we have with the master plan is to turn around and have deal with the ecotourism with the Economic Development Board. And so therefore I'll follow up after we talk about the rec. But I'd rather set the stage because economic development is going to talk about how we're going to market it, how we're going to turn around and manage it, how we're going to see it unfold. But I think we really need to set the stage for them to actually put on the play. That's how I look at the two players here. Is recreation, they set up the meat of what is rec within the community of Grand Island, and then the economic development is how to market it all. So therefore, I'd like to start our next session, which is not next month, it's the following month, which you got 2 months to see if we can put something together. And I can meet with you all before the meeting to talk about the things that I would like to see is accomplished and talk about the different items within the comp plan that we want to target.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Jim,
Yes.
I've been trying to get the Conservation Board to go back and look at the matrix. We've had a lot on our plate in terms
yeah.
of what we accomplish, try to do at our meetings. But I'm hoping next month that can be on our agenda, because I've been re-looking at it myself, and we just spent a lot of time trying to talk about the amendments to the solar law. So I think at our next meeting, we can probably start looking at the matrix and what we need to do.
Okay, so if I turn around and say May is going to be our focal point on recreation in the items within the matrix, and then look at July being either economic development or conservation, which one do you think would be ready to move? July.
July, I think we could do that. But I don't care. Sure, let's aim for that.
All right.
Yeah.
Why not?
And we, just for you and Judy too, we've talked here and there about ecotourisms ourselves. We could shoot out some ideas to whoever wants them.
Okay. Okay. So Judy, I will meet with you or have a sidebar with you or whatever, but you and I will discuss what we're going to try to do in May for recreation. Because our April meeting is going to be the LWRP.
Mhm.
And we're going to discuss the shoreline. So the stuff that's in, the one thing that I'd like to see recreation maybe take a look at is the 25 or actually 29 projects within the LWRP and see if they feel that any of that is something that's tempting to them, and also have their comments made on it if they have any comments. We're not looking for any thumbs down. We're looking for anything that would enhance the idea that's been put on the table. But it would be nice to know what the recreation feels, because a number of the 27 projects that are in it actually are recreational projects. So to me, I think I'd like to see
27 projects?
there's 29,
27
actually
projects?
29
I
projects.
think
You
there's
are going through
29.
27 projects? It took us an hour and a half to do one.
I tell you what, pick the best one of the 29 and that's what we'll focus on.
Well, a bunch of them are in state parkland, so you don't have to do those.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. We've been looking at, so there's only a couple that's going to really, 4 or 5 that I see in there that will be, I mean, to me, the biggest one, and is my pet, is the study of doing a bike path down East River Road from South Bridge to Buckhorn. And that's the one that I've been spending a lot of time on, trying to get funding for to actually do the study, not to actually do the work, but to do the study. But it actually is dealing with biking, which is recreation. So to me, I like to see some kind of maybe look at that. I don't want anybody down the road come back and say, I didn't know you were doing that. So we are looking at the LWP, as you know, that is looking at opportunities within the LWP that has to do with the shoreline of Grand Island. And it also has to do with the stream corridors of Grand Island, and it's, you know, stuff like that. So the issue is, I want to make sure there's total awareness of the things that are being presented. And I don't want anybody to be surprised when they don't come up or have a comment saying, I wish you had known that they were doing this, because I would have brought up a few projects myself. So again, having them take a look at the 27 or the 29, actually
29.
keeps growing.
That's even
It does.
29.
It keeps
Okay.
growing. Matter of fact, it's going to go to 30 pretty soon, because I think that we found there's a gap in it, because Paul and I have been reviewing a lot of the 27, and in there's a gap. The gap is there's nobody out there that's going to manage it after we do it. So we want to put in there that we need to have a mechanism to manage all the assets we're talking about moving and doing beyond, you know, with state parks or with the town of Grand Island and so on. So we're going to add, there's going to be 30 by the time we're done by the next meeting. And I know after the next meeting, it'll make it bigger. So,
Jim, is the Town Commons Creek one of those projects?
which one?
The Town Commons Creek, is that one of the
It is
projects?
not one of our projects because it's not on the river.
The only one we've done.
I know. It is part of the creek project though. So
Part of the watershed, it's not part of the LWRP, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, we did have a meeting on that yesterday, and we will be looking to cleaning it out and getting rid of the invasive species and the silt. We're going to, Christan is going to be talking to the Corps and the DEC, but if we have to get the delineation, we're going to be talking to Wilson, Don Wilson, is it from Wilson Environmental, to have him take a look at it to see what needs to be done, but talk to the Corps first, you know, exactly what they want us to do, because basically we just want to clean out the silt and everything that has gone into it and clean up the invasive species in there. So that's what we had a meeting on it yesterday. So, but
yes, that's
Did
good.
anybody
part
do a
of the,
botanical survey? Did anybody do a botanical survey to know which ones are the invasive species that are alleged to be there?
Well, the Conservation Board did, but that was a while back.
well, Don Wilson is going to be looking at us, so I'm sure it's a little hard to tell when it's, you know, February,
Well,
March. I don't know if you
yeah,
can
but
tell
let
with
me,
the invasive. There's a lot
Let
of
me
dead
be
stuff
just
here.
maybe a little bit blunt about this. Don Wilson's a consultant. Are you hiring him?
Yes,
Oh, all right. So he's going to do a botanical survey for you?
I
Yes?
have not, that's engineering what he's going to do. That's what they're going to be talking to him about. We haven't gotten to the particulars yet. We're still working on it.
Okay.
We gotta clean the creek out. And it'll make it flow better. It'll improve the drainage in the park in that area. It's silted in. The invasive species have choked out the creek.
You know, this is why we need a hydrologic study on the island here, because the two controlling structures to that parcel are the two culverts on either end of it.
Well, they put a new culvert in so that it drains doesn't back up as much as it used to, but it's
Okay.
still, you dredge it out and clean it out some, we'll be able to, it'll flow better. Now it's just not.
Yeah, you need to
Well,
reestablish.
actually, probably hardly any water. Well, there might be water in it.
Yeah, you
now 'cause
need
it's
to
spring.
reestablish the channel. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
I'm from the
Right.
east side. I've been told I'm an invasive species to the island.
I am.
Well, hey, I'm from
Definitely
Long Island. I'm really invasive.
it's there.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all a matter of perspective, what you think is invasive, what isn't, but I suppose those technicalities.
No,
Yeah.
no,
So-
it's not. It's an actual species that will tell you whether it's invasive or not. You mean obnoxious
Well,
and
I-
invading your channel is different from an invasive species.
Oh, I know that, Paul, but I find that big old dead cattails obnoxious, but that's okay.
All right, Pete, what do you got?
So Judy
Go ahead,
and
Pete.
Jim, when you guys meet, include me, because I kind of know what's going on with all the trail work and stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Um,
Right.
I actually,
You can put some
I can
time
tell
to
you
it.
that
Appreciate it.
I spent a couple hours today in the woods with Tom Cicery and Joe Mentor and engineering, and we studied the Big Six Creek crossing potential bridge. We walked what's done of the trail that feeds the Nike base to West River. We talked about a plan. We talked about what we can do in-house, which is really good, because we're starting to identify a lot of things that we can do on our own, and just without going somewhere for money or getting granting and all that other stuff. So that's pretty interesting. And I could loop you guys all in on that. So it's all part of the show. I will say, as far as Parks and Rec master plan meetings, those pretty much end with where we put in the community center.
Oh,
And where we put in the field house and all that other stuff. So that's a tricky subject, and I know Judy has been getting that at her pretty regularly too. So that's a conversation that's starting to resurge. So
so
okay.
here's my 2 cents on it is, Pete, you know that the trail system we have currently in the comp plan, it's kind of deficient in a couple areas now that we've been waking up to some areas. I mean, the notable one is Long Road, getting from the boulevard over to the West River
Mhm.
path.
Mhm.
And my feeling is that we've learned more, and I think that document needs to be updated. So the question I would have is, how do we get there? Do we bring the document back in here, where we start to doctor it again and basically come up with a version 2 of the trail map that we have put forward? Because Greenway and DOT and every organization we're working with now is all looking at that map.
Mhm.
And then when we don't have things on it that we like to address, they don't address them, right? So we really
Correct.
need to figure out a method to actually update that document. And I would not want to turn around at this point. We put it in the comp plan because it came in through the conversation with the members from the Recreation Advisory Board that help us along with you, which
Mhm.
was really important. We need to rectify that again and basically maybe put the recreation with you again to turn around and actually come forward with an adoption of a new trail map that basically have some of the elements that we're missing. You know what I'm talking about. So as far as the missing links. So we need to, what is the mechanism to do that? If there is not a master plan committee, like you said, it's now gone because of the community center, but then I would say the recreational advisory board then is the tool now, or the advisory committee that really should be engaged in helping develop that document out. And I mean, sooner or later, I mean, they own it. I mean, it
Yeah.
belongs in their world.
Yep.
So, but it belongs within the comp plan, and I think it needs to be updated. That's kind of where I'm heading.
I won't disagree with that. And I'll share something Greg Stevens said to me. And I looked at him kind of like everybody looks at me when I talk about trails. And then I was like, I get it. He said, why don't you guys have a trail plan to follow that creek that goes through the commons? I think that's which creek is that? Remind me.
Woods.
Woods
Creek.
Creek.
Woods.
Woods Creek.
Yeah. So
Woods
he's
Creek.
like, why don't you have a trail following Woods Creek out of the commons back to the power line easement and then over to baseline? And I was like, well, that's a really good question. And that sounds really great. He goes, that would feed people right into your town center on a path. And I said, well, that sounds really good. He goes, that might be a future project we'd be interested in. I was like, okay, good. So that was a great idea that I don't think any of us ever really saw.
Right.
And to Jim's point, there's time to make some updates.
Yeah, so I'm kind of looking at that because one of the things that Martha's looking at is, are we actually doing our best to turn around and implement the action items within the matrix? And I think this is, we looked at it basically trying to let it just flow through every committee kind of feeding back. But I think that we need to be more of a management looking at it and pulling it forward. And that's the management, or that's the style I'm going to use on implementing the matrix. And Martha, you and I are going to cherry pick from our minutes as to if we accomplished some of the items that are actually in our plan to make sure we're on track with it. So I'm kind of moving in that direction. Your comment.
So absolutely, that would be great to go back through. And I know, Rhonda, you took great notes when Judy was talking, because my first thought was, I can't type that fast and put all those things in the matrix. So that'll definitely be an opportunity to update some things in June. Thank you very much for what you were sharing, because I went in and updated those things in the matrix. So having groups, do report outs, and, and Diane, your group, what was it you guys are going to do July? I think that's great as a start of sorts. But with so many different parts within those sections, just having committees report out every other month because we're doing the LWRP in between is not really going to give us current conversation about what's going on, because it could take a year and a half before we have every committee report.
Yeah.
So I think while it's a good start, we have to figure out an additional system where the committees are engaged in greater interaction with us or someone to, share where things are going on. But the other piece that I think we got to get better at as a community is, and at least going back to what my original understanding of the value of having everybody see what's going on and reporting out on it, is those opportunities for committee to start recognizing who's doing something similar that they can piggyback or tie into. And I don't think we're creating enough of those opportunities, and really having everybody understand what other people are working on in order to strengthen and tackle some of those items in the matrix. So I would kind of challenge us all to figure out what's a good way to make sure that that cross collaboration is occurring, because I think we're missing an opportunity there by not doing that as well as we could. And then lastly, my other comment is, what's the status of us being a board? I'm going to keep asking that.
I was waiting for it.
I'll put my hand down now.
And actually, I want to talk to your point there. I completely agree. The left hand doesn't always know what the right hand's doing, and I really was hopeful, and it does to a point, but it could do better. This board, to me, is the melting pot. Where Diane Evans goes back to conservation and said, "This is what's going on." Where June goes back to historic preservation and said, "This is what's going on." Dave Bruno goes back to the planning board. If they ask, this is what's going on. So I mean, this board is so important this group, I'll call it for the second, is so important that everybody reports back to their own separate entities on what's going on. And if they have some input, then it should come back, and, I understand that attendance is difficult sometimes. And I hope that whoever the assigned person to this board is at least reading their minutes and going back and explaining to the board what's going on, and hopefully we'll get some more cross interaction there. Back to your point, your main point. So we've had some conversations, Jim and I did with Mr. Whitney, and I've had some conversations on the side with Rhonda. Thank you, Rhonda. She's been a great help with all this stuff. I think we're starting to lean towards making this a commission, not an advisory board, which basically has built into that representation from each board, as we do now. It's either a chair or somebody appointed to this board from each chair. I think that's very, very much important, and just for the reasons you've said. That being said, the members at large kind of got me at a little bit of a question mark on how we want to do that, what you want to see that look like. There's been a lot of people on this board that have been very engaged and worked very hard to get it to where it's at. And I certainly wouldn't want to say, okay, well, we're going to redesign this and we're not going to talk to them anymore. That's not the case at all. So I'm not trying to punt, but I'm going to give it back to you. What do you guys want it to look like?
Well, could you, what do you mean by, what's a commission? What,
So-
how is that different from a board? I'm not clear on that.
Well, see, we're thinking of commission because there's always going to be a seat at the table from every advisory board. So therefore, it's going to be not I guess member. It's going to be the board. Every board has an assignment, a person assigned to this. So we don't want to elect people to those positions because they're already serving on other boards. So that's why a commission makes the most sense that way. As far as our members at large, you know, what do you want to see? How many do you want to see? How many people do you want around the table? How many people do you want voting on things? You know, so there's a couple questions there on how you want it. Ultimately, we're going to have to go into the town code and create this thing because it doesn't really exist. We have a human rights commission, but that's clearly depicted by so many members, and that's very, very well drawn. This one's going to be a little more, you know, 5 years from now, it might be somebody different for the planning board, for example, than Dave Bruno. So we don't want to say Dave Bruno. We want to say planning board chair or a delegate, you know? So all that being said, how many people you want on this? What do you want to do?
So
You know,
here-
those are, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say, those are really good questions. We started out as a very large committee.
Mhm.
And I know there's still a lot of people that are part of it, but they don't really show up to meetings anymore or not very often. And I think the size we have right now has been more manageable in
Yeah, I would-
terms of people getting a chance to say what they want to say.
yes.
So I would hate to see it get back quite to the size that it was before.
I guess I'll give you my overview of it. You have one board already that's in place that's kind of unique, and that's the Historical Preservation Advisory Board. That board is actually two components. There are actually three components. The one component is the Historical Preservation Group. The next group is the River League Group, and the third person is the town historian. So when you start appointing, each one have a different timeline of appointment. One could be 5 years, the second one could be only 2 years, and the other one is 1 year. So with what I envisioned with this group was that the boards that are assigned by the fact that the boards have an impact on what we're doing on the big picture. So therefore, in the beginning, it was conservation, recreation, transportation, economic development. And those were like the primaries that really needed to be at this table. But I think historical preservation really deserves to have a seat at the table. We also had the ZBA sitting at the table. Of course, now we're overlapping on the same day she's working, but so therefore you have ZBA. So you got 7 right there. And then if you turn around and you stood with the 6 at large, the at large members would be the ones that actually would interview for the board, Pete, that would be the ones that you would go out and say, we're advertising for members to be on the board. And then those 6 seats could be the ones that are doing. In the past, I've always had 4, but when the town board actually was, I had 4. And then the town board came in, they wanted to have 5, 1 representing each council member, which I think is kind of odd, but then 1 more at large. That's how we ended up with 6. So I'm not uncomfortable with the 6 because the 6 basically are the ones that come in with the fresh minds, the fresh ideas.
Yeah.
The people from each of the advisory boards, they may be there as the chair, like Dave, and then Dave turns around and becomes just a member. But Dave would have a very strong idea of what we do, and therefore may remain on the board as the delegate to the planning board, therefore not putting the burden on the new chair. And I think that's what's happened with Diane, right, Diane? I mean, Diane's not the chair, but
Yeah, no,
she has a strong bearing within the conservation board, but at the same time, the chair is very welcome, very comfortable for her staying here and keeping that legacy knowledge moving forward. And I think that this group is dynamic in its movement. In I think the members that are here, the only one that I know is not here that I know, or 2. One we actually turn around and put the farmer group or the farmer representation here, but Sheila and I talk all the time, so I keep her abreast what's going on, and when I will pull her in when I need her. And then we're missing Larry today, which was at the wind meeting before. So again, he couldn't make it. And then the other one is Debbie couldn't make it because she's doing the tax thing tonight. So we do hear from the members, and I think we float, but I also think that we pull people in when we need to pull them in on things we need to get it done. And I like the thing that Martha's thought about getting cross-pollination with the different silos that we're working with, meaning the different boards. So that was what I was looking at, Pete, is that you're looking at 6 people at large. And I think those are the fresh bloods that come in that gives a bearing on what is the establishment. Because when you serve on a board in town, you take it for granted that you have all the facts, but they're coming at you. And so you just talk in short language, where the 6 people coming in that are not on other boards, they basically go, what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
So
Yeah, but they also ground you and they bring you back to normal.
yeah.
To, you
So
know,
I like the size, and it really comes out to about 18 people, unfortunately. But
yeah, that's what I mean. It's huge, you know,
Sure.
and nobody's ever been said, you know, you're not a member of this board, go away, and we don't want to listen to you. You know, it's always been an open forum, which I appreciate, and I think everybody else does. You know, and I think we get a lot of information that way. But I mean, as far as being assigned to this, who do you want assigned? You know?
So some of the thoughts, I think it's really critical to have and I don't even know how many main boards are there on the island. Do we have a number of how many boards, official boards
oh god,
that
yeah.
there are?
I think there's 22 or 23.
So that's a question about if there's 22 or 23, is there particular reasons why certain board members wouldn't be part of the commission? But another way to look at it from my perspective is we have certain groups that have been assigned responsibilities as part of the matrix. And so at the very least, those folks should have someone assigned to the commission as a responsibility, because they have some, you know, for lack of a better word, a stake in the game. Not that other people don't, but if already certain boards have been designated as being responsible for something, then somebody should be representing those groups at the very least.
Mhm.
I don't know that in the beginning, when we first started this whole process, I think the beautiful eclectic set of thoughts and processes that everybody brought to the table was absolutely critical and crucial. I'm not sure now where we're at if having 6 at-large members is as necessary, because now we're following through with implementation. And I don't know that you really need 6 at-large voices to help with implementation, along with the key parties that need to you know, make sure things are moving within their committees. So that's just my thought as far as how to trim it down a little bit, because I think 18 is way too large, or 22 plus at-large members. There isn't enough hours to talk about things
I would
with
agree.
that many people.
And I insulted the Chamber of Commerce for a moment there, and not to insult them, but the Chamber of Commerce is very important to be at the table as well, because they're looking at, from their preview, they're looking at it as you're doing all these great things, and how does that fit into the business market, and how's the business market going to react to it? I think that he's critical in it. I mean, to me, I like to look at each one of them and address each one of them. You're right. Maybe we don't need 6 members at large, but I do think that we should have that public representation. I don't care if it's 3 or 6.
Yeah.
And I would see them as staggered members, meaning they would have staggered terms. They wouldn't be all gone
Sure.
at once and so on.
So just according to the matrix right now, because I went through and coded who had responsibilities. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 groups that have a responsibility. If you don't count the town board one, if the commission really acts as the town board, then you really only have 1, 2, 3, let me recount, 4, 5, well, actually, long range planning committee is listed on here. So if we became a commission, then you're really only talking, you're only talking 8 groups that are listed with targeted responsibilities in the matrix as it stands right now. So if
Martha,
you
could
look at,
read those groups?
sure.
Okay.
Because my thought is if you have those 8 plus 3 at large, you're talking 11 people. I think that's a really manageable group. So it's the Historic Preservation Board, Chamber of
Mhm.
Commerce, Agricultural and Farmland Advisory Committee, Traffic and Safety Advisory Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Planning Board, Economic Development Advisory Board, Conservation Advisory Board, and then we have a notation for Town Board and a notation for Long Range Planning Committee. But if the committee was actually the commission, you wouldn't have another person for that, other than maybe if we recognize like Jim as the person who, you know, kind of is the coordinator or chair.
We'll call him the
And
big toe.
and then, you know, the whoever from the town board, in your case, Pete, you would be the representative for the town board as a natural course of things.
Mhm.
So in my mind, you would have 8, did I end up saying 8? 8 groups and 3 advisory plus Pete plus Jim.
Transportation was on that list too?
Yes,
Who?
it was.
Trans-
Transportation.
Yes.
Well, it's Traffic and Safety Advisory Board.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much all. I mean, I think
Yeah, it's-
Architecture Review Board's not on there,
No.
but I don't know that they've been a
But
part
they
of this.
didn't have a responsibility in the matrix in the truest sense of the word.
They
No.
didn't to this point, but I'm going to tell you in the future, if we start diving into zoning qualifications and design standards, that
Mhm.
we are absolutely going to need their input. You know, that's
Right.
going to be where they kind of engage. You know, so I guess that's where I'm struggling is how do we define this? And you know, I'm happy to call the town attorneys and get started on it tomorrow.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that we're
Right.
setting it up the right way and not say, geez, I wish we did this,
Right.
you know, so.
So is the zoning, that's a separate group from the planning board and part of my ignorance?
ZBA.
Yes.
ZBA.
What
So
about
Yeah.
technology?
at the time of the matrix, they didn't have a specific thing assigned to them.
Right.
Well,
That,
we're gonna
but
have
that
to look
doesn't
at that.
mean that, you know, so I would agree. I think the zoning should have a seat as part of the commission because there
Mhm.
is a lot of items that are connected to zoning. So if you did that, now you're up to 9, 12 plus Pete and Jim. So you're up to 14
Well,
people.
Pete is the liaison, so is,
Right,
yes. I mean, so when you look at the formal commission, it's the
Right.
Don't really
commission
count.
with the liaison.
right. But that's what I'm saying, as far as people at the table, it would still be 14 though. Because you'd have your 12 people plus the chair plus the
Yes.
liaison.
Yes.
And so Pete, would it be possible, or Jim, that if you had these set, let's just say for kicks and giggles right now, it's 12 people plus you got 2 making 14. Could it be done in a way for the commission that there would be some kind of fluidity in bringing in targeted groups as needed to address a particular item? So that they
And-
wouldn't be a long-standing person of the commission, but an invitee to the commission
Well, yeah.
as
and
needed?
Yes, and an illustration of that is that we're going to develop a hamlet for Ferry Village, right?
Right,
Well, this committee will be the lead agency maybe of it, but they're not going to be the group that actually is going to be heavy
Right.
into developing it. So that's when you're going to bring them in to deal with that issue and then create
Right.
the document and then release them again. It's similar
Right.
to what's going on with the farmland protection group. That was a spinoff for the farmers to turn around and create the farmland protection the group, which was another group spun out, but the chair is actually staying with us so that we can make sure that those plans stay a bridge to the entire planning, right? So the long range planning is not a committee, but it is the commission. And
Right.
the long range planning is what spun off obviously the LWRP, which is the same folks that actually did the
Right.
master plan. So you had that same consistency of idea of design and the mechanism to actually create a plan. So the plans all look alike and they all feed into each other, right? So, I mean, I think that you're on the right track. I guess, Pete, what you're looking from us is, could we define the names of those people and then put that list together? And the question is, do we want 3 at large, or we 5 or 6 at large? And I think that the at-large people only grew because the town board wanted more people that they could put on the board. That's all. That's the only reason they did it.
You'll always have the ability for people, just like any place else that it's public. If somebody wants to come and give feedback about something, it doesn't prevent anyone from participating in feedback.
No.
From my understanding. So,
I-
so Pete, what I would like to see personally would be that there's, potentially that set group of 12 with the liaison and the chair, with some kind of provision that as the commission needs it, that groups are pulled in as needed, but only on that temporary basis to complete a project, however that language needs to be written.
So,
I
mean,
like that suggestion a lot.
yeah, I like the idea too of being able to flow people in and out. I guess the point I'm trying to make though is we're gonna have to design, there is no code for this. So this is a code change. And it goes in our code book that this exists as a commission. And it is apprised of a member of each one of these advisory boards, plus so many at large. And that basically depicts the voting members. I guess I would care, but I mean, I'd like to say I wouldn't care if there was 100 people at our meeting. You know what I mean? That gave input, although we would be here all night, so that's kind of, whatever we put in the code is what it's going to be. And whoever comes in and out is great, but I applaud it, but I'm just trying to set up the voting, I guess, the voting membership and how it's comprised. That's all.
Right. I mean,
Why don't you just take the website the town's website has 19 entities listed under the advisory board, one of those being the long range planning committee. I took a quick look. There's 5 I could remove immediately because they don't really seem like board status places. The Human Rights Commission, I don't know, like whatever that is in there, but you could take that list quickly, peel that down to 12 to 14, have a justification for initial standing, add 3 at large, and this is the longest conversation a sales guy's ever had about commission. As a guy who talks about commissions all day, like I think you could always change it down the road, Pete. Like intelligent design, and then if it doesn't work, add somebody.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna create code, and I was just trying to do it right the first time.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I think you can pare it down though.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, Jim, maybe you and I can meet offline and kind of put a list together.
We'll do that again. Yes, Pete. By the next
Well,
meeting,
no
I tell you what, by the
technology.
next meeting, we'll at the next meeting,
Judy has a question.
Yeah, I can't hear Judy's question. Something about
Well,
the
I would
technology.
I was asking about the technology advisory board. I mean,
Yes.
remember what Eric said? That nobody resigns anymore because they all have technology to do stuff?
Yep.
And they have their phones and they have technology, and we're getting 5G and we're getting hot spots, and we're right now in the process of technology of getting a new website out for the town and trying to brand the town and make it more accessible. I mean, we're looking dark fiber, we're looking at fiber, we're looking at a lot of, you're on every single meeting, just like I am. So, it's the things that we've got a lot looking at what's the future of technology is on Grand Island. So I don't know how it falls into the comprehensive plan, but we are still there trying to, make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, Judy, I've considered that because, I make every meeting of the Technology Advisory Board. And therefore it's a very important board. And I think it's really defining itself within the community because it's going to become very important as we move forward because our community is going to depend on technology. We'll look at that. I mean, I'll tell you what, Pete, you and I will meet on it, and Martha, you and I will reach out to around and have a conversation about it too before the next meeting. So we formally put something before it. There's 2 things we need to do. One is who's actually on the committee. And the second piece of it is what is the goals and objectives and the purpose of that committee. And that, I think that needs to be drafted out. So we need to sit down and do that real quick. I mean,
I'll be honest with you, by the next time this board meets, I would like that to be on the town board agenda.
Okay.
I would. So let's just get it done. I mean, I think it's important this group stays together in perpetuity. I think, and Eric's right, you can always fix things later. I was just trying to get it as right as we can the first go around.
And
And-
Pete's tired of me asking the question every meeting.
Well,
I'm not.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing.
I mean, it feeds in for the next piece of the conversation. The next piece of the conversation is something that, Martha, you asked me the question of what was the outcome of the conversation with me, myself, and John Whitney and
Right.
Pete. The conversation was to discuss a number of things. One is how we're looking at the LWRP and how we're going to implement it, and who is going to be the agency, or what type of agency, or what method we're going to have for applicants when they're going to apply for something that the LWRP is going to be, asking for. In other words, you're
Mhm.
going to do something on the coastal, they're going to make an application, the LWRP is going to have to address it. And then who exactly is going to be that? Is it going to be this board? Is it going to be an agency within the town? What is it going to look like? And at the last meeting, I did report that in the discussion with John and Pete, we felt the best mechanism really was to put the application respondent in the building department. So therefore, the building department is going to be required to understand the LWRP. They're going to understand how the LWRP is going to affect anybody who makes an application and how they then would address it. We would then turn around and have the agent, or either a member or all members within the building department, to turn around and then take the application and realize that, well, it's just a dock off a house. This really isn't really necessary because it's not going to impact anything greater than the lot in front of them. If it's going to be the Howden Express, or not the Howden Express, but the Radisson, well, that's a bigger score. So that means then the building department then would turn around and start to bring in resources to actually address the issue, and therefore talk to engineering, talk to long range planning, talk to whoever they think they need to get their hands on to actually address it in a bigger scope. So that was the method that we're actually told the planners to actually implement within the document, which needs to be put before the state of New York. That was one piece.
Who is our building department?
That's our code enforcement. Yeah, well, as code enforcement, that's going to be Ron Milks.
Okay,
But they would be the one taking the first application anyways. So the application is going to arrive in the town of Grand Island. Who gets it? I mean, they're going to go to engineering, or they're going to go to building. And I think that we decided it should go to building department because they're actually talking about building a dock. And then they need to pull in the resources to make the proper conclusion as to how they go forward. And that means that they can refer to this by saying it's going to be the Radisson. They can then refer it back to the long range to turn around and talk about the comp plan and what the comp plan actually was intending to happen when something of that magnitude was going to happen on our river. So that was the first part of the conversation. The second part of the conversation was one about actually what do we look like going forward, but we didn't have an in-depth conversation about that so much as what Pete just drafted out for you. But the other part was talk about how do we implement the form-based coding that is asked for within the comp plan to address a number of zoning changes in a very comprehensive way. And they asked me to turn around and come up with what is the path to do that. So there are two paths. The first path is you do a wholesale. You turn around and address the entire code book, which is very large. And then you spend years and years and years, and you go line by line by line by line with every single code. And then you try to do it, without having to spend a whole lot of time really in depth on them, but at least figure out how to do it wholesale. That is very time consuming and definitely needs a planner full time. Definitely needs to, it's going to not get done in a timely manner, meaning that it's going to take years to unfold. The other method is to do piecemeal. In other words, start addressing different zone quadrants and looking at their zoning, and then talk about how to make them having them come forward over a performance standard where you got drawings, you got illustrations about what the code really is trying to say, what kind of illustrations and what kind of models could come out of the reading of that is coding. So actually is more drafting and more picture based. If you do it that way, then you really get down into the center of the issues and look at what does residential coding look like? What does commercial coding look like? And do it piece by piece by piece. And I think it's done better. But the piece that's really critical here is that if you and when you turn around and launch into code, it goes to public hearing and then goes to the gauntlet of the public. At that point, if somebody doesn't like the way the code was going, they're going to ask for the head of the messenger. And if the messenger is appointed yearly, it could be stalled after the first year, kill the lead of the initiative, and then the initiative goes away. So that's why it's very important if this board becomes a commission, then when they're positioning and doing their work, they're not subject to being torpedoed at the end of a year period, because we're now a board that's actually appointed by the superintendent. I'm talking very candidly, right? So the issue is that we need to address that issue before we actually launch into the code-based stuff, and then look at that, and then look at actually building the scope of work and building the process to actually identify it. We really need to start addressing our code, because we have projects around the table right now that really need to have a code review that in some places doesn't exist. Our master plan calls for mixed use to be given in certain particular areas, and therefore we can't even do them because the code doesn't even exist for that to occur. And so we really need to tackle that issue. It's a big one. And I would love to be involved in it. And I think this board would be the perfect board to turn around and start reviewing those activities. Of course, you've got the master plan, the LDRP on your butt right now, but I think that this is all part of the big game anyways, because when you set the code, you basically set the standard of what we do and go forward. And then the master plan itself becomes real, because you're implementing it through code. And that's really how a master plan is developed. And then that's how the code of Grand Island is developed. Currently, the code does not match what the master plan is trying to say. That's a lot.
So,
Okay,
so-
but that conversation is what went on with myself and the supervisor and Pete.
So there's 2 mixed-use projects on the table right now. And Jim's right, there is no method to get them through the code cleanly. As a councilman, I can't certainly go in and change code in front of a project to enable it, because that is just, there isn't enough lynch posts in town for me. It needs to come through a commission, it needs to get washed. And I believe this is the board to do it. This is let me say that this is the only board that we have that I think can do it, because it has input from all the other boards.
So between what you said, Pete, and what you said, Jim, it just reinforces the importance of, you said tomorrow you're going to work on the commission, because the sooner it becomes something that the town board or the supervisor approves, then the sooner we can start tackling those particular items. And if our hands are tied in tackling them until we're formalized, then we need to get it done sooner than later.
Yeah, Rhonda?
I completely agree with that.
Rhonda?
If I could just interject, I think that that you've stated the reason for being a commission or board several times. John was here 2 meetings ago. I think he's in full agreement with that and the purposes why. It's just, it's at a point where this is an outsider looking in. You guys have been doing this a long time. You know what you need, you know what it needs to look like. And I think I could say John's really looking for you to put that in front of him.
Okay.
And then you could move forward with that. And
Yep.
Thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate your perspective.
I agree with Rhonda.
for what it's worth.
They're looking to this board to say, what do you want?
All right, well, we told you, so get started tomorrow.
So I really think but when you
All right.
put it in paper and say, this is what we see it, I mean, that's how it's written up. And the reason it needs to be there, it takes time to put things through code. It involves the attorneys, so you have to wait for them, and it just that's why Pete wants to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
But if you could just like this week, put something in writing, it moves that process along. I think you guys know exactly what you want, better than John could know.
Yes.
Mhm.
So,
But that-
so Pete, Eric put a name, because I said, well, we need a different name. We can't really call ourselves a Long Range Planning Commission. It's not really fitting anymore. So
Yeah.
Eric proposed the Strategic Planning Commission. I think that's great.
I like it.
Grand Island Rock Stars. How's that?
What's the initials on that?
SPC.
SPC.
See, I don't think it's offensive anywhere, and there isn't any other characteristic political group that would match that, so.
Yeah.
I think it's
Good,
good.
I like that. I mean, to give you an illustration of it, there's a development that's going on in Love Road right now that fits within the concept of the master plan. We had done actually a charrette on Love Road, and what we figured that the redesign of Love Road Plaza area would be beneficial to the community and beneficial to that hamlet, and we wanted to see a hamlet built there or designed for that. And the planner, the big landowner that's in that area, had presented the plan and almost 2 years ago, and basically ran aground a little bit because of the whole COVID. But now it's come back with another design. It's basically asking for mixed use, and it's interesting because the charrette that we actually developed actually is saying exactly what he wants to do. He's kind of following the plan that we all laid out, but we don't have a code for it to actually to be realized. And it's before the ZBA right now tonight to actually ask for them to give them a use variance, which is very, very difficult to get your hands on. And so to me, in questioning it was if I would turn around and write a letter indicating that his project fit within the designs of the comprehensive plan. I withdrew I commented to him that I would love to do that, but I wouldn't do that without having it before the Long Range Planning Committee to actually discuss it and come up with a recommendation, and then put out a letter or a memo from the Long Range Planning Committee to indicate that it fit within it. And here's our comments. And then therefore it can be used by other boards, be the ZBA, planning board, or whatever board it feels would be impacted, especially the ZBA and the planning board. But I felt it really needed to be in a formal process, not with the chair of the committee being asked to write a letter in support of a project. I felt that was not my role, and I felt that I'd rather see a formal process put in place where a project was actually committed, like Amazon was submitted to us for review, and then we made a comment. I'd like to see that kind of routine, but because we're a committee, it's kind of different. So I did reach out to John about it and said I'd like to see a formal process, and he agreed. So and we laid out a formal process, informal process to have it handled. And therefore, if those projects do come to us, then there'll be a comment from us, not just a comment coming from me.
Or me.
Or you.
By the way, the ZBA tabled them.
They tabled them tonight.
Yeah.
They did table, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, that's what I thought was coming.
Well, that's
So,
better than deny.
huh?
That's better than deny.
Yes. So we need to, okay, I'm going to start working on this tomorrow, for sure.
Do we have to have a motion or anything as a group?
I'll take the motion.
I motion that tomorrow Pete puts in the paperwork to make us the commission.
Wow. She's
Come on, it's Friday.
Tomorrow's Friday. It's Gene Day, isn't it, Gene Day? Okay. Okay, is there the motion is you want this to be put before the town board as soon as possible?
Sure.
Got it.
In writing.
In writing.
Well, I mean, if we write it or you write it and present it to them, it's much faster than to go and just talk to somebody again.
I agree with you. No, I agree with
You need a definite
Yeah.
thing done.
Yes, and I'll be honest with you, I do understand the political waters. I understand that there's got to be a will on their part, otherwise we're just knocking our head against the wall. And I think they do see the merit of it. And in the conversation I got from John and from Pete, obviously is very strong in that regard. So I think it's absolutely the time to move.
So Jim, let's you and I commit to meeting next week and hammer all this out, and I'll get the attorneys engaged as soon as possible.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Pete, I'll pull up the code for the other commission we have and make a
Okay.
copy. Then you can kind of plug in from that and it'll speed it up maybe on the legal end too.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
that way we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
Correct.
Can we have a target goal just to keep us all accountable? Can we have a target goal of when this has to be to the board for on their agenda?
Well, I'll have it to the attorney really quick. And that I can't speak for how fast it comes out of the attorney.
Fair enough.
Well, let's put it this way. We'll make sure that we have it on their agenda. I don't know if we can get it on the agenda for, it'd be the 15th, wasn't it, right, Pete?
Yeah, I think
Probably
it's
gonna
the
be
15th.
kind of tough because I think there are a couple of things already on the agenda for
Yeah,
Nathaniel.
so
You know,
let's say that no later than April 5. That's the April 1st meeting.
That's perfect.
Well, actually, see, the fact that it's a code change means we have to set a public hearing. And to be honest with you, I believe it even has to go to the planning board for
Yep.
discussion.
Yep.
So it's got a path. So I would really like to get it started so it could spend its time in the path and get this done.
Okay. All right. Monday, no, you got something big going on Monday. We'll work it out between now and Monday.
I'll
We'll
let
have
you
meetings
buy me
today.
lunch, Jim. It's okay.
Okay, I could do that. I'm getting out
So-
of the house more often. I've had my 2 shots and I've gone past 20 days of my last shot, so I'm now safe. I'll just
Gotcha.
still wear a mask so I don't get anybody else, and I'm not
Yeah.
carrying it. So I'm starting to move around now. The
So
Welcome Center
Jim,
is my favorite place. Go
on
ahead.
the agenda, since you don't have it, the third item under old business, I don't know how I got that there. That should not be on this agenda. And then the other thing that was left, you've already mentioned, which was update on the plan for zoning changes. And you and Pete were working, you were going to put together that plan for a new subcommittee or something. So I didn't know if you had an update on that. And the last item was timesheets. And that was just a reminder for
Oh,
everyone to get their
great.
timesheets in.
Yes, Rhonda, I have to bring mine into you. And I've done all my past ones and I'm bringing them in. The interesting part is I'm supposed to sign off on timesheets. I don't know if I have to sign my own timesheet, but the interesting part is Lynn had me down have a timesheet as being when I was a deputy supervisor. Well, I didn't get paid as deputy supervisor, so I was always a volunteer. So I won't be submitting an employee timesheet. I'll be actually submitting a volunteer timesheet for everything I've done, which I got a lot of hours. I followed the one that I was looking at all the timesheets everybody else is putting in, especially Paul's. Paul's got the best timesheets. So I said everything he did, I did.
can I ask a question, please? I asked about these timesheets for the Historic Preservation Board because I wondered if other committees were doing this. And they said no, that they hadn't. And so Jen and Mike were both going to go back, I guess, and talk to you, Jim, and find out about it. But I said, if the idea of the timesheets is to find out how many volunteer hours are being put in so that when we apply for grants, we can show how many volunteer hours are already being given, then it's important for every committee on the island, every advisory board, it seems to me, to be collecting some sort of information like this. And then wouldn't we need some sort of standardized sheet, or is there already something there? I've never submitted anything for anybody, but I've certainly spent a lot of hours working for the town for nothing.
Well, Rhonda basically sent out a timesheet to you, which is a state contract or a state timesheet. It's Schedule F, but this one's unique because we're getting a grant from the State Department and we're getting credited for time served by us participating. So this is kind of unique to the grant itself. So it's not something you would apply to every single board, but just to this board, and it's only applied to this board because of a grant. Once we finish this grant, we no longer have to do timesheets.
Okay.
And Jim, isn't it only for our meetings that have to do with LWRP?
Yes, it's only for LWRT time.
Okay.
And it's your time at the meeting and it's your time preparing for a meeting. So if you're like Paul, who does a lot of writing to straighten out some of the stuff that's in the LWRP, that's credited time. If you have meetings to deal with the LWRP, that's credited time. I mean, I tell you what, I think that the time clock we're going to put in is going to be 3 times what they're actually looking for from us. So I'm not worried about the credit we're going to get for time served or value, or they call that value, time served, but it's yeah, that time is going to be in there. They're doing, we have tons of hours. We've done some, you guys have done some fantastic time. So Paul alone is putting up thousands of hours into this
I
thing.
think you need to also include, field trips, because June's saying she wants to do a walk-along tour. That would be chargeable time back to this particular grant,
Yes. it
because
will.
it's related to the LWRP. So if you're doing field work that's related to this, that also counts.
I was just unclear about whether it was something the town was doing,
No.
or if it was just this committee, or if we were supposed to be doing it for every committee. So
No,
that was why I needed to ask the question.
No.
Joan, do you
So June-
understand that?
so
June, you
June said
understand
you
the
got-
explanation?
Hmm?
June, do you
So June-
understand the
Oh,
explanation?
yes, I've
Okay.
got it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, okay.
Can you, June, can you put together your hours from the past?
Well, I could try.
You can always look
Um,
up your calendar and look at the calendar you did the outdoor.
And I do that. I save my calendar with my tax records every year because I sometimes need to go back. So I'm
Well-
sure I could do that.
All you gotta do is take the 2 hours every time we met together. So,
Yeah,
and then I
wow.
made you do some homework on this one, so you're gonna have the hours you put in to turn around and do the work you did.
All right.
So that's gonna fit into the outdoor a little bit.
So either we need a bathroom break or we need to get going here.
We're done. Done.
I have
So-
one
I
thing.
vote for being done.
Yeah,
Done.
me
I have
too.
one important thing for everybody. I'm sorry. Just want everyone to know it. You'll see information coming out this week, but we're gonna have a cleanup Grand Island drive again this year, the second annual, on the 24th of April. We're gonna put some prizes together. It's the chamber, the town, and some organizations, and we kind of want to have we're gonna have a survey ahead of time of areas that residents think are in need of sprucing up on top of ones we've already identified. But we really want to get a bunch of groups out, kind of make it a little fun competition, everyone posting their pictures of before and after cleanup, and come out of here in spring where it's always kind of looks rough in a lot of places. So you'll see info, just keep an ear with your organizations. We're really trying to make a big effort to make an impact this year with a cleanup. April 24th, 9 to noon. It's on a Saturday.
Eric, I can tell you already that the, not whatever they call them, says the water keepers are coming over to do the West River Trail.
Yes.
And so the West River Homeowners Association has just voted that we are going to buy whatever refreshments, coffee, bottled water, that sort of thing. And we will be available and hand that out to all the people who volunteer over here. So, you might want to get other groups that would be willing to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, June. We were actually thinking about piggybacking on the date, but we had some conflict there with some of the organizations. So we figured, hey, 2 dates working.
No,
Island-wide is great.
we're doing it that day, April 24th.
Yeah,
That's
we were
the
the same day?
Yeah, same day.
Oh,
Parks
guess we're doing the
Department
same
called
day.
me.
nice. Well,
Also-
we'll see information coming out on the town website. I think Jen Bainey has the ball on that one, and just in the next few days. So we really
Okay.
want to make an impact. So everybody's help would be greatly appreciated. So we can have some fun with it.
Yeah. Also on the 24th, we're going to be giving out 100 trees for Arbor Day.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Come after those
What
trees.
kind of trees?
Swamp white oak and a couple evergreens, which I don't remember now. We're working with GI Farms to do it. So
Awesome. If you got any palm trees, let me know. I'll take one.
a palm tree. Okay.
I'll tell you what, Eric, you can get the one next door to me. It's lit up in neon.
I like that guy. I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Diane, I'm gonna come after those trees. I got a forest I gotta fill.
Awesome.
Eric, I could sell you a saw to cut down that neon tree.
I'm in.
is that at the visitor center? Is that at the visitor center like last time?
No, it's going to be in Vets Park at the new shelter.
What day is it? That's on the 24th?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Do you have a time yet?
No. I don't have a time.
Do we have to sign up for a tree in advance or?
No,
are you just gonna do
we're doing first come, first serve this year.
Oh,
it? Okay.
how
I'm
many can
sleeping.
I have? Can I only get one or I could get more?
Oh, gosh, I don't know about that.
All right. I think we
Motion
covered everything
adjourned.
on the agenda. So the next meeting is going to be on the LWRP. You'll be getting a notice from Justin with some more material to read over. So prepare for the LWRP next month. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Everybody against? Again, this is my favorite time, by the way, to be with you all. This committee is just awesome. I just get rejuvenated every time I meet with you all. So you all have a good day and a safe life.
You
So Jim,
too.
we'll talk next
Bye.
week, Tuesday,
Thanks.
okay?
Bye,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Guys.
All right.
Night.
Good night.